All right, what we have on the bench today is the oil supply line for the center housing of the turbocharger on my Turbo Twin Comanche. This end connects to the back of the engine and receives engine oil pressure. Right now we have an air chuck on here because we're going to use shop air to test this out. And the other end connects to the turbocharger. In the middle, we have this fitting, and then we have a one-way check valve. This check valve, you can see that there's an arrow scribed there, so that tells you the normal direction of flow for the oil, and it will not allow backflow at all. In the forward direction, there's a spring-loaded ball check valve that will close if oil pressure drops below approximately 20 psi. And the purpose of that is so that when you shut down the engine and oil pressure begins to drop, this check valve will close, so it will not continue to feed oil into the turbocharger, where it will then pull up and get hot and coke up. So that's the purpose of this check valve. Now we're going to test this today, and the way we're going to do that is we're going to first blow shop air in one direction. This is in the normal direction here, and we're going to regulate that air pressure, and we're going to slowly increase it from 0 psi. At approximately 20 psi, this will open. This end is going to be submerged in a bucket of water, and we will begin to see bubbles. We should not see any bubbles below approximately 20 psi. And then once we get above 20 psi and we verify bubbles, we'll slowly decrease it. And when it drops below approximately the same threshold, right around 20 psi, the bubbles should stop. Then we're going to take this chuck off and put it on the other end, and we're going to run air in the opposite direction. And we're going to run all the way up to 100 psi, and in no case should we ever see bubbles come out of this end, because remember, this is a one-way check valve. It's not supposed to allow flow in that direction, only in that direction. So let's run that test now. All right, to start this test off, we're going to put shop air into this end, which is the normal direction of flow. There's the arrow pointing that way. We'll submerge this end in the bucket here. First, let's hook it up to regulated shop air. We're sitting at 0 psi, and let's see what happens. Let's see when we start to get bubbles. So there's 0 psi. We'll increase the regulator. There's 10 psi, 15 psi, there's 20 psi, 22, 25. Now you can see the bubbles right about 25 psi. And this gauge may not be completely accurate, but as I reduce it below an indication of about 20 psi, notice that the bubbles stop. So that is behaving exactly as it should. You open it way up, there's 35 psi. It's really bubbling. But again, as I drop below, well, now it's indicating about 20 psi as the threshold. So that might be a little bit of gauge inaccuracy on my cheap Harbor Freight regulator, but that's basically the idea. All right, so, well, what's interesting is now that check valve is stuck open because we're only at about 10 psi. So I don't know if we can tap on that. Yeah, we actually do still have flow. We're only indicating about 5 psi now, so it was working initially, but as we took it up to 35 psi and then back down, that check valve appears to have stuck open. That's a problem. You do not want this check valve stuck open. So let me take it back up to 35 and back down again. Yeah, so it's still blowing bubbles at around 5 psi. So we got a problem. What I might do, there might be some small piece of foreign matter that has clogged this check valve. So what I might do is try backflowing again and then try flowing in the normal direction, and we'll see if that solves the problem. But if that doesn't solve the problem, then this check valve is going to have to be replaced, even though initially it looked like it was behaving normally, but now it's clearly not. So that's important, because if this thing's not shutting off, it's going to let oil continue to flow to the turbo after engine shutdown. That's a bad, bad thing. Here's a close-up of this one-way check valve. Here's one end of it, and here is the other end of it there. Now, I actually looked up the specs on this thing, and there's an application chart. You're not going to be able to see this, but the part number for this particular check valve is a 559-alpha-2 Mike Papa-27. So those series of numbers actually mean something. The 59 in the 559, that first series of digits, the 59 refers to the seal material of this particular check valve, and in this case 59 is Buna N. And then the alpha tells you the body material. It's aluminum as opposed to brass or stainless steel. The -2 is the valve size, and the -59 refers to the cracking pressure. I'm sorry, it's a -27. The -27 at the very end of the part number, which means the cracking pressure is 27 psi. So, knowing that the seal material is Buna N, we're not going to put brake clean or some other harsh chemical into this thing. I did try taking this thing apart. As you can see, there's a slot there for a screwdriver, but when I turn that, it just turns the entire stem. So I don't know what the procedure is for taking this thing apart. I would have to contact the manufacturer for that. But theoretically, if you could get this apart, then you could probably replace the O-ring or maybe just clean off a piece of FOD or something like that. Now what I might be able to do is take a valve stem holder and hold that while I unscrew this. Let me see if I can actually do that. All right, didn't have a valve stem tool to hold that. That's kind of a tripod shape in there, so it's probably a special one there. So probably need a special tool to take this apart. So failing that, what I'm going to try is, in the normal direction of flow, I'm going to try blasting it with a momentary burst of 100 psi shop air and just see if I can dislodge whatever might be blocking that O-ring from sealing. So let me just give that a try. I'm trying not to launch this across the shop. Also try in the opposite direction. And it's possible that worked. So we can reassemble this hose and try it again. Of course, it would be wise to clean this thoroughly with a blast of shop air to make sure there's no bits and pieces that can clog that valve up again. But I think we can try testing this valve again. If that doesn't work, then I'll have to inquire about a special tool to take this apart. And they actually do make kits to put to rebuild the insides of this too. So we'll explore that next. All right, let's test this thing a second time now that we've kind of blasted it with a burst of 100 psi air. So here's our arrow pointing in that direction. So we're hooked up to regulated shop air. We got 0 psi right now. We're submerging this end, and we'll slowly increase here. There's 5, there's 10, there's 15, there's 20, no bubbles yet. Remember, this thing's supposed to crack open at 27, 22, 25, and there's 27, and it's just starting to bubble. And as I increase, the flow increases as well. Now going back down, we're at about 28, 27, 25, it's down to just a bare trickle. and there's 20, and we got nothing. So we've cleared this obstruction that was blocking the seal here. It's an O-ring seal, Buna N O-ring seal there. So must have just gotten a piece of FOD stuck in there, but we seem to have cleared it. So yay! Now we'll test it in the opposite direction. Okay, now we'll test this thing in the reverse direction, so we should not see any bubbles at all. Arrow's pointing that way, but we're going to be putting air in that way, and should see no bubbles. So we're at 0 psi on the regulator. Hook this up, and let's start increasing. There's 20, there's 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, and 100 psi. No bubbles at all. We'll back that back down. That's what you want to see. When you reverse flow this thing, you should get no bubbles all the way up to 100 psi. Now, just to be sure, let's reverse this again in the normal direction and just make sure that it's working properly. So we'll put this air chuck on the other side. We'll snug it up hand tight. We're at 0 psi. We're hooked up. This is the normal direction of flow. Just one final check. Got 5, got 10, got 15, got 20, no bubbles. Coming up on 25, 27, there's bubbles. There's 30, back down, 25, and the bubbles stop at 25. Okay. All right, so we have successfully rehabilitated this thing. We can now put it back in the airplane.